I'm Scott Feinberg, executive editor at The Hollywood Reporter and the host of our Awards Chatter podcast. And I want to thank you for joining us for our third annual edition of the podcast that we're recording at the Cannes Film Festival here in the beautiful Campari Lounge. You can't really beat this view. And so we want to thank them for hosting us and thank all of you for being here. Today, it is my great honor and privilege to be joined by one of the most gifted actors and filmmakers of our time, a two-time Oscar winner and screen legend who tonight will premiere at this festival the first chapter of a multi-part Western that has been his passion project for decades and that he co-wrote, produced, directed, and stars in. Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1. I'd like to read something that was written about him in Time magazine back in 1989, but is every bit as true today. Quote, "He is something else, a grown-up hero with brains. He's modern and classic. He thinks fast and shoots straight. He has city reflexes that help him beat the big boys at hardball, yet he stokes memories of the lone man on a horse silhouetted against the craggy horizon and setting sun of Old West values. He has the requisite danger for big screen stardom, the stubbornness in pursuit of ideals, the slow anger when pushed, the threat in a face that can mask its intentions, even as his actions inspire trust. He could be a husband, a lover, a chief of state. And now he is poised to tote the 10 commandments of frontier heroism into an anxious new decade. He is the hard-riding scout, bearing the movie's message of what America thinks it was and hopes it can be again." Close quote. Would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Costner?
Good morning, I think.
Good morning, and thank you so much for making the time to do this. I understand that it's not the first time that you've been at Cannes, but it's the first time that you've unveiled a film of yours at Cannes. Can you just tell us a little bit about your history here at the fest?
Yeah, I was here once. Thank you. There's a lot of Campari going on here. Isn't there? Anybody seen any Campari lately? Yeah, I was here. I was selling Open Range, but it played on one of the back streets, and I didn't even watch it, and I started to wander around, and I started to feel this thing that happens here, and somebody said, "Do you want to go on to see a film?" And I said, "Of course." They said, "Well, you're going to need a tux." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I think it was the second Matrix, but I went up, and I walked on the red carpet, and I looked around, and I will tell you for sure, I thought I'd like to come back to this place, but I want to come back to it in a very specific way. When I feel like I've authored something that I can stand in front of it, that there's no apologies, that if you have problems with the film, you bring them to me because they were my decisions. And that happened. And I knew I was going to make these films, and I knew I was going to do it independently. And I had the idea, if I make these films, I'm going to bring the first one to Cannes if they'll have me. And Theory stepped up in a very big way for me. This whole festival did. And when you're an independent filmmaker, to have a platform, the biggest platform in the world here, I can't tell you what it does for me, what it does for this film. It's important. And all I can say is this is an important moment for me, and I'm in the celebration of movies, which I think unites us all. So
that's great.
That was it.
Well, we are going to circle back around to Horizon, which I've been lucky enough to see already. It's terrific. It's going to premiere tonight. But on this podcast, we go chronologically. So if we can go to the very beginning, can you share where you were born and raised and what your folks did for a living?
Yeah. Well, I was born in a place called Compton in California, and I think a lot of you have heard of it, straight out of Compton. My parents were from Oklahoma. My dad had one job, and it was during the Dust Bowl, and they lost everything. And my dad swore that he would never let that happen to him. He watched his own parents lose everything. His father began to drink, and And so my dad was a really simple person, and he had a job. And he told me time and time again, never let another man outwork you for your job. And he repeated that to me so much. And he only had one job his whole life, because that was to feed his family, and we didn't have a lot of money. But he said, don't let a man outwork you. And I remember looking at him and saying, I'm 5 years old. I won't, but really, that's what has to happen. And so I've had a very conservative, simple life. And the idea that I would find my way into storytelling was that I knew how to work. I worked fishing boats, commercial fishing boats. I drove trucks. I framed houses. But I also wrote when I was by myself, and I didn't really tell people about it, because in my family, you had to have a job, and you weren't going to let anybody outwork you. And so to be writing was to be daydreaming. And so code for daydreaming with my dad was, you're lazy. And I said, I just can't help it. I said, I can work and daydream. And I was lucky for me that later in my life, I heard the ticking of my heart, and I knew that I would tell stories. And I knew that I wouldn't let anybody outwork me. And that if I had to work alone, I would do that too.
Not all of us have a specific moment that we can point to where our lives went in a certain direction. It could have gone either way. You're sitting in accounting class in college, right? And what happens? I was
in an accounting class. I was in my last year of college, and it was at night. And so if you know anything about night school, the people in there are really serious about going to school. Shit. And so I knew that on a bell curve, I was going to be on the wrong end of this thing. And I really actually felt myself turn off in the middle of class, and there was a student newspaper. And college newspapers are only 3 pages long. 1 page, 2 pages, it's over. And I got to the back of it, and I saw there was a thing, an audition for Rumpelstiltskin. It was a play. And I'm thinking, Rumpelstiltskin? What's Rumpelstiltskin about? I forget what Rumpelstiltskin. I go, well, there's got to be a prince in it. They all have princes, right? So I'll just go down there and I'll try to be the prince. And of course, I didn't. And somebody else got that part. But for the first time in my education, even in my last year of college, I caught on fire. There was something that interested me. You know, I have a dog, a hunting dog, not very popular with people, but for me, the dog was everything. And my dog, like a normal dog, just lays in the hallway like everything else. If the door, someone knocks, there's a bark, and there's a loud. And so he's just an average dog. But when I take him out into a field of grass, a yellow field, where I'm going to hunt with him, something happens to him, and he looks like a different dog. It's like his IQ goes up 30, 40 points. His head is up, his tail is out, he's moving. And I thought, I need to be like this dog. I need to know when I'm in the right place in my life, and if I can get myself in the right field, my IQ is going to go up 30 or 40 points. And when I found storytelling, when I found movie making, there was no guarantee of success. There was no guarantee of anything, but I was in the right field. And that's the only thing I could hope for in my life, and for anyone else, that if you find your yellow brick road, your first step on it. You don't have to have the guarantee of what's going to happen. But it's a neat thing to feel like, can I find that first step on what it is I think I am? Can I be that dog in the field? Can I look like this is where I belong?
Now, at the outset, as would be the case with many people just finding their path in life, I gather there was a little bit of doubt if this was also, pursuing acting was the responsible thing to do. And so can you share how, of all people, Richard Burton helped to clarify that?
Well, he didn't clarify it as much as I just ran into him on the plane. And I remember seeing him, and I was just married. I was married at 22. I married the first girl that liked me. I thought, this is great. And I thought I was getting old at 22. I should do this. But it was on my honeymoon, but I was thinking about acting. I hadn't told my wife that that's really what I thought I was. And I got on a plane after our honeymoon. I remember it cost $300, and actually $324. And so now we're leaving Puerto Vallarta, and we're waiting to get on a plane, and I see this one couple being led out to the plane, like getting on the plane by themselves before anyone else. And so, okay, and now the rest of us go on a plane, and I look up and I see it's Richard Burton, and I see that he's bought all the seats around him so that no one could sit next to him. But I didn't know anything, and I became that dog in the field, and I just looked at him. I was looking at him, and I didn't think that a person could buy seats around them. I came from a very conservative background. It was just hard enough to buy one fucking seat, let alone like 5, so nobody's around you. So, and I knew he had a volcanic personality. I knew that he was, him and Liz Taylor, legendary. But I didn't know anything. So if you've ever thought about a mongoose and a cobra, the mongoose has no idea that this thing could kill him. And so I'm looking at him, and finally I walk up to him. I walk all down the aisle, and everybody in the plane went. It's like
peering.
So I walk up and I whisper in his ear. I said, Mr. Burton, I said, I don't know what, but I said, if you don't mind at some point during this flight, if I could ask you a couple questions. And he said, yes. He says, I'll look back for you. And I said, okay. And everybody went, sat down, and I went back, and even my wife was going, what the fuck was that? What are you asking him something like that? And so now I watch him just like the dog. I don't look over here. I don't look out the window. I don't care what's out the window. And I see him, and he's not turning around, and he picks up this, this book, Gore Vidal on Lincoln. It's about 800 pages. I think, fuck, he's going to read the whole thing. And so now he's reading it, and I'm still watching him because I'm not going to miss a beat. And he closes the book after a while. After about, he closes the book, and I'm like halfway up my chair, and then he takes his chair, and he sets it back, and he goes to sleep. So now I'm thinking, I'm still going to watch him. And so I watched him, and he finally woke up, and he looked back at me and so sweetly just went. And so I walked up to him, and everybody once again like this. And my wife was like this, like what happened? And I won't tell you what we talked about, but there was something very sweet about him to me. And I didn't stay long, and I came away, and the plane landed, and he got ushered through customs like that, and the rest of us were there for an hour. And like I said, we didn't have a lot of money. We spent it all on the honeymoon, and we were sitting on our luggage at LAX, just like going my way with Clark Gable, whatever. And I'm just sitting there because our parents were going to come pick us up. I was no catch. I was just a person trying to find myself, sitting on my luggage with my new wife. And all of a sudden, this limousine came right here. It was like, because I was right on the street, it came right here. And it stopped. And the window came down. And it was Richard Burton. And my wife's like, and he was about this far away from me, and he just said, good luck to you. So that was my story.
That's great. That's great. So after...
But I will say this, I always regret, he didn't see me have any success. He passed away, and I always wished I could have circled back to him.
Well, you, as you began to pursue screen acting, I know getting the SAG card was a little bit of an ordeal. There's the movie Francis that Jessica Lange was in, and I know you've said there was some a bit of a roller coaster getting it on that. But eventually you get the SAG card, and there's a movie that comes along called The Big Chill, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, who's going to come up a few times here. And I just wonder if you can contextualize for a young actor. You guys do weeks of rehearsal, weeks of shooting. It's a group of incredible contemporaries of yours, young talent. And then you get a phone call that this character who you're playing, whose suicide is essentially what brings the group together, has actually been excised from the film. We all know that it worked out now. And in fact, that Lawrence Kasdan would come back to you very soon after with the role that kind of was a star-making role in Silverado. But you didn't know that at the time. Was that crushing? Did it knock your confidence? How did you take that?
It wasn't.
No?
It wasn't, because there's a lot of people look at our lives one way, but you have to look at your life the way you see it. And so a lot of people, they look for outward success. We look at the tip of the iceberg. You're not successful unless you have a part. You're not successful unless it's a big part. You're not successful unless you're a lead, whatever. Let me see your resume. I didn't measure my life that way at all. I knew that when I got the big chill, the day I got the part, I knew my life would change. I knew it driving down the freeway. I knew it. My life would change. I knew that because I was with the right people. I was in the right field. And of course, when I got cut out of the movie, I just accepted it. I accepted it as part of the mythology of whatever my life would be, because what was supposed to happen had happened already. You're waiting for the movie to come out. You're waiting for the movie to premiere. I knew I had started 9 months earlier, that I was on the yellow brick road. I was there. And so not being in the movie was not something that affected me, and it's not an afterthought. I knew that I would have a moment, and I didn't know what it was going to be, but whatever it was going to be, I was going to be ready, and I was going to be more ready because of that film. So outward success is something that the world sees, but you have to understand the moments in your own life when something really did happen. Somebody else says, this is when it happened. I said, no, this is when it happened. For me.
And it is kind of poetic that this same filmmaker, Lawrence Kasdan, comes back to you approximately 2 years later to do Silverado, which is not just any movie, but a Western, which has been the genre that you have sort of largely single-handedly kept alive. Let's just note, we're going to come to Dances with Wolves, Wyatt Earp, Open Range, Yellowstone, Horizon. I guess the question I'd like to ask is, what is it about the Western genre that appeals to you and that makes you such a fit for it? I mean, even your band, I believe, is called Modern West, right? There's something for your whole life that the West has appealed to you.
Well, first off, I think Westerns, they're really hard to make, and there's not a lot of great ones. It's interesting how much the public will mythologize them and say, oh, just love Westerns, and it's true, but there's not very many good ones, and a lot of times it sets the genre back when you see movies that are just too simple. There's a black hat and there's a white hat. There's just too simple. Somebody kills my family, I get to kill people the rest of the movie. It's okay. I guess if it's done well, then it's okay. But a lot of times people think of the American West as a myth, as something that's simple. It was terribly complicated. People from Europe came there to settle. They were told the things that they didn't have here, living under a monarchy, living under a king, your children would too. But if you could make it across that ocean, if you could get onto this place didn't even have a name at that point. Could we get to this place that looked like the Garden of Eden? And if you were mean enough, and if you were tough enough, and if you were resourceful enough, you could be a king. You could take what you wanted and you could keep it. And you could keep it for your family. And while that was the message, while that was the promise, there was the civilization that had been there for 15,000 years. And our story can't be told if we don't tell the fact that we rolled over these people. But what is it I love about the West is that was great drama there. Drama that we'll never experience. People think of Westerns as simple. They're not simple. Living now is simple. It's amazing that we still can't fucking get along. We think that the West was violent. Look what's going on in the world. We have learned nothing. But what I love about the West is that drama could occur over water. It could occur over seeing a stranger. You had to be incredibly resourceful. And so for me, creating the architecture of a movie for you to sit in the dark, I have to find a story that I think is entertaining, because this is what our connection is, to be entertained, not to be schooled. It's not my job to reinvent the Western. It's not my job to recreate history. I think our connection is about entertainment. But I don't have to forfeit my own ideas about what I think are important, what I think are interesting, what I think are entertaining. And that's the platform that Europe gave me. I used to think that movies were just for Americans. Remember how I grew up with nothing. My family from Oklahoma. It was America. Even when I finally made a movie, the movie got shelved. It was only when I went to the Venice Film Festival 35, 40 years ago, that a movie that I made that I was very proud of, that it got shelved, 3 years later was playing. And somebody said, I thought they wanted to interview me. I was with Silverado. All the cast was being interviewed. It was my first big role. No one wanted to interview me. Finally, I had one interview, one in 2 days. And while I was doing my interview, some guy came in and he said, you have to come with me right now. I said, I have my fucking interview. He says, you have to come with me right now. Your movie is playing, Fandango. And I said, no, I'm doing Silverado. You get that wrong. It's not so, it's Fandango. It's a Silverado. He goes, no, it's Fandango. You have to come right now. And I thought, but this is my interview. So I went with him. And when I walked down the street, I had no idea. Walked into a theater, it was full. Even in the aisles, people were sitting, and upstairs. And I was in the last 6 minutes of this movie. And I thought something was happening. And the movie ended, and I couldn't believe that the theater was full, and the people were standing, and they were cheering. And the lights came on, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. I'd also lost my luggage, so I was in the same clothes for 3 days. I just had a T-shirt on. And at one point, the person said, I think in Italian, that Kevin's in this room, and the lights came on, and the people turned, and they looked up, and they clapped for me. And my heart was like, you can't believe it. It was so big. And we walked out of that theater and walked down that street in mass, 800 of us. And I thought, my God, what has just happened? But something did happen to me. And I realized that movies weren't just for Americans. I know that may seem odd to you and go, God, Kevin's a little stupid. The world's pretty big. But I knew right then that I would change my thinking, that I would make movies that I thought the world could see. And these moments have happened to me in my life, and that was one of them in Venice.
And we'll note, so Fandango was the first leading role that you played, but then as a result of Silverado, this small but star-making part, I believe it's probably directly a result of that there's two movies that come out in 87 that, I mean, when you're in two big movies in just a matter of months, the first in June, the second in August, that's gonna really put you on the map. So let's just note, first, Treasury Agent Elliot Ness going after Al Capone in Brian De Palma's The Untouchables. That's out in June of 87. And then Lieutenant Commander Tom Farrell, the double agent in Roger Donaldson's No Way Out in August. I think No Way Out was finished first, but came out second. And I guess I'd love to hear about both of those, but particularly The Untouchables, because you have said, at least at one time, that the role of Elliot Ness was in some ways the most challenging one that you'd played. And I found it interesting, your explanation for why.
Yeah, it was. I had to play this very straight arrow guy, which wasn't necessarily a problem to play that. How are you doing? See one of my actors here, and I have so much thanks for the actors in my life that have come and supported me. Thank you. It wasn't so much that the part was hard to play, but because it was so straight and so narrow, and I was playing opposite Robert De Niro, he began to improv, and I didn't feel like I could improv outside the lines of who I was. And so it was very, very difficult. And I'll tell you who came to my aid, and I miss him dearly, was Sean Connery. You know, somebody says, who's the best actor you ever worked with? It's very hard, these lists, right? Very hard. But if I have to say someone, I might say Gene Hackman. And somebody said, who's the biggest star you ever worked with? And I say Sean Connery. I remember in Chicago sitting with Sean, there was a tape around us. We're getting ready to do a scene. And this woman kept trying to get my eye, and I was talking, and I thought I could see she was insistent on the fact that she wanted to talk to me, and I thought, well, I'll get over there. I was still doing something, so finally she was very pretty, and so finally I kind of step away because we're getting ready to do a scene, and I walked over to her, and I you know, it's like, and I kind of leaned into her, and I said yes, and she looked at me and she said, "Could you get me Sean Connery's autograph?" And I said, "Yes, I should. Yeah, I'll get that for you right now." So I said, "All right."
That's great. Well, after that killer 87, 88 and 89 were your first baseball years. Let's note, in back-to-back years, 88, summer of 88, the directorial debut of Ron Shelton, you are playing Crash Davis, this veteran minor league catcher in Bull Durham. And then in 89, Ray Kinsella, this Iowa farmer who begins hearing voices in Field of Dreams, directed by Phil Alden Robinson, which just earlier this month turned 35 and is really now almost like the It's a Wonderful Life of our time. I think it's still as great as the day it came out. I wonder, just A, are you a baseball guy? And B, were there people dissuading you from doing two baseball movies back to back? I mean, you made the right decision clearly, but I could see somebody saying at the time, be careful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to this be careful business that can scare us off from what we want to do in this life. There's a lot of people to warn us off things. And I mean, and they do it with even good intentions. Some of the people closest to you, your parents, your other thing, what it is they have a fear for you that you're going to fail or be embarrassed, and they can hold you back. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm still this mongoose with the cobra out there. I don't really care too much what people think. I enjoy people. And I am not aloof. I'm not a loner, but I'm not afraid to go alone. And so what happens is I felt like they were both good movies. It didn't matter that baseball was box office poison, and it didn't matter that the second one was baseball. I thought they separated themselves. So it really wasn't a hard decision for me. It was kind of easy. But I'll tell you a small little story about that. Is like, when I finally did get the role, it was a big fight with one of the most legendary mean producers, and I also met John Huston, the great John Huston. I wanted to direct Revenge. I wanted that to be the first movie I directed. So I met John Huston. He says, "You're very young, son. You're very young." And they didn't let me direct Revenge. The next movie I directed was Dances with Wolves, but I was too young, and I remember that. But the story I wanted to tell you about Field of Dreams is, at one point I asked the director, because Robin Williams, the great Robin Williams, was also kind of up for the role for Ray Kinsella, and I just thought Robin was fantastic. And I remember asking the director why. I said, why did you choose me for Field of Dreams over, Robin Williams? I think I might have taken Robin Williams over me. And he said, let me tell you, it's an interesting thing you asked me, because he said, this is why. He said, when I think of Robin Williams, I think he's a person that does hear voices. And wouldn't be a surprise if Robin Williams heard voices in the cornfield. But he goes, when I think of you, I think of a person who would have a hard time hearing voices in a cornfield. And I thought to myself, I love your thinking. I was thinking he thought that through very correctly.
A quick follow-up about Field of Dreams. there's another actor in that movie who, in some ways, to me, was you before you in terms of being a very physical actor. He could also be doing nothing, and it's fascinating. And that was Burt Lancaster, who played Moonlight Graham. I know it was right at the end of his career, his life. I believe he was, to some degree struggling a bit. But what stands out to you about your interactions with Burt Lancaster?
Number one, he was a beautiful man. And I mean, just so handsome and a very, very gifted actor. And we talked quite a bit. And he had one of his definitive scene was when he described baseball and wrap your arms around second base. And he worked with his hands so much. The sky's so blue. He was a very physical guy that way. But he was having trouble that night. He was having trouble with his lines. He was having trouble remembering them. And I remember that the director was becoming upset. And I said, this is one of the greatest actors in the world. We're going to keep working with him. And I remember there was a moment, because I had just adored him, where he didn't want me on the set because he was embarrassed that he wasn't remembering his lines. And I said, no, I'm right here, and you're going to be perfect, and I'm going to see it. And he was. All you have to do is get it right once. And there was this moment, you could have heard music from heaven, but Burt was perfect, and it made the movie.
That's great. A year after that, and we'll note Field of Dreams was nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. Field of Dreams nominated for the Best Picture Oscar, starting a very rare feat. We'll note that for 3 years in a row, you were the star of a film that was nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. Next up of the three was Dances with Wolves, which, just for anybody who needs a reminder, Lieutenant John J. Dunbar, guy who almost accidentally survives a Civil War battle and requests reassignment to the West because he wants to see the frontier before it's gone, winds up meeting and bonding with the Lakota Sioux, who nickname him Dances with Wolves. The story of Dances with Wolves sort of traces back to your film debut in a very low-budget 1981 film called Stacy's Nights. I wonder if you can explain that, and also how you, rather than other directors who you had considered working with on this, wound up directing it yourself.
Like anything in Hollywood, there are people that are trying to get there. There'll be somebody in this room that's trying to get there. And you can't get there, And acting is a funny thing. If you're a musician, you can be on a corner with your guitar and open it and even maybe get a little bit of money and play. But if you're an actor and you're wandering around town just dribbling out your lines, they can put you in jail. You need a place to be able to work. And a lot of times there's no place. And we just started an acting group down by the LA River, which isn't really a river. It's a cement thing with no water in it. It only fills up when it rains. It was a chemical plant. And we built a little stage. And many of us went down there and acted because none of us had any money. But out of that group of people, and there was a lot of rock and roll people that I hung with down there. And out of that group, I began to identify people that I thought were interesting, and one of them ended up writing Dances with Wolves, and I brought another one on to help me produce it, and he won an Academy Award too. So it's a long story, and I'm not going to bore you with the things, but Dances was like anything else in my life. The mongoose, which is. I read it and I thought, this could be a movie. Why wouldn't this want to be a movie? No one wanted to make it, so I got $75,000. I wrote down on a napkin how I would make this movie. I would give my friend who never made any money, the director, the writer's minimum. I would get myself a secretary. I would pay her, I wrote down there $450 a month or a week or something. And I thought, boy, I've never hired anybody. So I remember trying to interview her. And she came in, and I said, well, you have to be, come on time and stuff. She looked at me, and I thought maybe I needed to say more. I said, sometimes I work longer than that. And there'll be some unusual people calling here. And that's how I hired her. I've had 5 in my life. They've all worked for 5 years. They all hired the next one. They all had that little rub up when they would hire the next one, that for maybe 2 months they tried to help too much, and finally the one said, hey, I know what I'm doing, okay? That's the way you did it with Kevin. This is the way I'm doing it with Kevin. I saw this happen 5 fucking times where that little dust up happened moment. So I don't know. I just, I believe in movies just like I believe in Horizon. I believed in Dances with Wolves. It seemed no one else did. It went around the studios twice. I will tell you about Open Range. I will tell you about Dances with Wolves, and I will tell you about Horizon. Very American movies. But the first dollar that ever came to help me in all 3 of them was from Europe. American movie. I couldn't get anybody to do it. So thank you for this kind of openness that you guys have had. Imagine that. It was...
I just wanted to know, I think some of the reservations of the Americans, including some of the directors that you considered hiring before you took the job yourself, they felt, right, that the idea that a third of it would be subtitled was a killer. They didn't, in many cases, want the opening battle sequence. I mean, you were not going to compromise.
Yeah, well, I always think everybody's better than me. They can't outwork me, but I think a lot of times people are smarter than me, and I had this movie, and so I went to 3 very notable directors, and they all had something that they weren't going to do in dances, and thought it was this, thought it was that, and one by one I said, well, no, I can't let that happen. And the second one, that happened, and the third one, and you know all of them. But the name's not important because they're really good guys. But I thought to myself, fuck, I want the audience to see all of this. And I said, well, I'm going to direct it. And I thought, if anybody's going to wreck it, it's going to be me. And I'm going to shoot it all because I believed in the story, and I believed, like, when I put something up, gave something to my mom, she put it on the refrigerator. She cared about what I did, whether it was good or bad. And I understood I couldn't make refrigerator art, but what I read when I wrote Dances with Wolves, I wanted to share with you once you were in the dark. And I thought, I'm going to shoot all of this. And so I did. My first cut was 5.5 hours long, one movie. But I worked at it, and finally it came. But it is worth noting that the first money that came to help me was from overseas, and both that and in Open Range and this thing I'm doing now, Horizon. This thing that's just, the Horizon. I don't know, man. It's
We'll definitely, we're coming there. But I think another thing that connects Dances with Wolves to Horizon, with also Black or White in between, is that you have dared to do something that a lot of people are warned not to do, scared to do, won't do. When you believe in something, you put your own money behind it. With Dances with Wolves, I think it was several of I heard 19 million budget, and maybe 3 of that came from you.
Yeah. You can spend I don't think I'm a great businessman. I'm a pretty good daydreamer. My dad would tell you that. But I've had kind of success that I couldn't even dream of. But I don't want to let this pile of things I have, whether it's money, whether it's stuff, I don't want to let this thing be so important to me that I can't think about what I want to do right here. That if I do what I want to write now, if I want to make Horizon, am I going to lose this pile of things that I made? And I thought, I can't let that own me. I can't let that be the deciding thing. I'm going to keep enough things that my family's going to be good, but I can't let this thing that I kind of wanted my whole life. I'd like to have money. I'd like to have nice things. But I thought to myself, that's going to control me if I let it. And so every time I've looked at this pound, I went, fuck, I don't want to lose you. Why am I so interested in this movie? Yeah. And I end up taking everything I have and I push it in the middle, simply because I like movies the way you like them. I just want something to happen when that fucking curtain opens. I miss the curtain. I miss it terribly. Because I remember as a kid when it opened like that, something magical could happen. It didn't always, because it's hard to make a good movie. But when you make a good one, it can have moments. When a movie's working at its very, very best, a movie will have moments that you'll never, ever forget. A look, a kiss, something that's said. One of the most powerful lines to me in all of cinema was in Giant. And Rock Hudson, the beautiful Rock Hudson, was now an aging, silver-haired, wealthy bigot. His son married a Mexican woman. He was a bigot. He didn't want that. Now he has a Mexican daughter-in-law and pretty soon a Mexican child, and the incredibly beautiful Elizabeth Taylor. She has silver hair now. It's an epic movie. There's a theme with me, right? Things I like, kind of things I like. So now they're older, and they're sitting in a diner. And he's still who he is, a big deal in Texas. But they're sitting in a little simple diner, both these two are the most beautiful people in the world, but now gray-haired, this Mexican daughter-in-law and this child. This is back in the 50s. And the guy who owns the diner won't feed him. And Rock Hudson, who's a big deal, goes, what? He says, I'm not feeding this Mexican child and this one. He goes, he was confused. This same guy who was that guy saw bigotry right in front of his face, and he was confused. And the next thing you know, he's in a fist fight with this guy from Korea. Our leading man, Rock Hudson's in a fist fight in this diner, and they tear the whole diner up. And Rock Hudson does the impossible in American cinema. He loses. He's beaten to a pulp. And he's laying in a corner. And Elizabeth Taylor walks over to him and bends down and says, you never stood taller when you stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. And so, you know, for as phony as movies are, they're really real to me. I look at them and I knew right away who I needed to be. And it had nothing to do with victory. It had everything to do with what you believe in.
And that's, I mean, Dances with Wolves is an example of that. That began just an incredible run of hits. We had Dance with Wolves in 1990, Robin Hood, Prince
You're
of
going to
Thieves.
wear these people out,
No.
Have a drink,
They know
Jesus Christ.
They know what they signed up. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, 1991. JFK, 1991. The Bodyguard, 1992. All of these giant hits, and sort of helped to cement, I think, your screen persona in a lot of cases, which obviously there are deviations, but people have often likened you to Gary Cooper, just this sort of strong, silent type. But that being said, you've also given some of the greatest monologues in the history of the movies. And one of them I've got to ask you about is the summation at the end of JFK, where, this is you and Oliver Stone. And I wonder if you can, there are many I could have prodded you about, Black or White, so many where you've given great monologues. But that one I think is a particularly special one?
Yeah, a lot of times I choose movies based on writing, what I get to say, what is being said. And sometimes I see things, I think, I need to be the person that says this. And that's why I'll go after these movies. I'll say, I think I'm the right person to be able to say this. And there was this 11-page kind of monologue. And I looked at that and I thought, it's just something I wanted to do. And I'm very slow. It takes me so long to learn lines. I'm so much slower than every other actor. It takes me about a month. Other people memorize things. I just can't do it. There's something in me that's wired wrong. And so I learn all the lines before every movie before I show up, and I learn everybody else's lines too. But it takes me a long time. And I remember when we got to this courtroom sequence, Oliver, was, we're setting up things, and he said, well, why don't we just do a run through, of this thing, and then I'll figure out where to set my cameras and what I'm going to do. And we were scheduled for 3 days. I said, okay. And so he says, all right, everybody here in Tommy Lee Jones. And he goes, action. It was a rehearsal. And I do the whole thing. And Oliver says, for fuck's sake, you know this whole thing? I said, yeah. And he goes, you know it all? I said, yeah. And he goes, all right, listen to me. I want you to go back to your trailer, or go get a massage, go do something. I'm going to set these cameras up, and we're going to do this whole thing. And I thought, I don't need a massage. What I need is I want to do this thing. He goes, well, I'm just going to set up the cameras. So we did. And I ran through it about 5 times, and we were done at 1:00. And the scene was over. And it was something that we were going to do for 3 days, but it was something I'd worked on. I'd worried about it so much that I just wanted to be ready. I wanted to outwork everybody.
That's brilliant. Speaking of scripts, The Bodyguard was written by Kasdan, originally, I believe, for another of your heroes, Steve McQueen. That gets made. You were, I think, instrumental in giving us Whitney Houston as an actress there. There's the next year, A Perfect World for Clint. And then we come to a period that I think, with the benefit of time, people may look at a bit differently. And I want to ask you, because there were just a few in a row where you got some grief over them. There was Wyatt Earp, there was Waterworld, and there was The Postman, which the third one you directed. Now, the reality is, people talk, I remember that with Waterworld, it was Fish Star or Kevin's Gate or all these kind of mean things before anyone even saw it. But I think people look at if they look now, they actually were fairly successful movies, and there's a lot to say for them. But I think with Waterworld in particular, did you feel there was a target on your back when you have had such a run of success that some people have their knives out? Do you think it was the fact that it was the first movie over $100 million budget? Just with the benefit of time, anything about that?
See, that's such bullshit, what you just said.
What?
No, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. And I remember going to the studio. I said, maybe you need to give this script up to somebody else, because I said, listen, we don't have a third act. And I go, you're telling everybody this is a $99 million movie. It's like a store, what 99, 90 cents, how they do that, like a cent's going to make a fuck. Why do they do that? So everybody knows what that is. It's $7.99. It's fucking, it's $8. It's like, oh, Waterworld is going to be $99 million, and it's going to be a 99-day schedule. I shot Dancer with Wolves on 106 days. It's going to be 99 days and $99 million. And I remember going up. I said, hey, really? Listen to me, fuck. Who decided this movie is going to be $99 million? And they go, I said, the most expensive movie to that date had been $129 million. I'm going to school you just a little bit.
Right, okay.
And it was Terminator 2, not $129 million. So I busted him on that. I said, look, we're not the first movie to go over $100 million. There's probably been 10. And you know, when you confront power, they're kind of like, well, yeah. And I go, so what the fuck? Why is it 90? Why are you saying it's $99 million? They said, we can't be the first movie that's budgeted over 100 million. It's like a politician or something. There have been movies over 100 million. We just can't be the first movie that's budgeted over 90. I said, oh, so you're going to tell everybody that we're making a $99 million picture. And I said, look, I use my money on movies. I said, the most expensive movie is 129. Why don't we pike a 10% contingency on that, $13 million. So now it's like 143. That would be a more reasonable thing to say to people. We're making this movie on the water. Well, we can't say that. I know you fucking can't say it, but it's going to get said to me that we're over budget on our first day of shooting, that we're over schedule on our first day of shooting. The movie ended up costing $157 million. It's a little bit more than 143. And it went 157 days. And so this problem landed on me that I was out of control. Jesus, look at me. I'm not like this, but I mean, I paid for my movies. I know what money's worth. And so I think it's a fantastic movie. I also, it's one of the most beloved movies. People come up to me to this day and talk about Waterworld. All I did was stood behind it and made it the best it could possibly be. And everybody ran for the shadows, for the corners, and I'm standing like stupid Kevin, you know, taking it around the world and trying to explain why it was so expensive. I never told anybody that story, what I just told you. But you're all drunk anyway. Look,
when you have gone back over the years to baseball, as with For the Love of the Game, or For Love of the Game, or the Western with Open Range, does that feel like just a kind of a comfortable? Obviously, they're all challenging, but I mean, is there something almost cathartic about going back to certain genres for you?
Not really. I'd still like. I'm on the hunt for the great script. I'm still looking for the great story. I just don't care where it comes from. It's like, there's the supermodels and so beautiful. And sometimes there's the waitress. You just have to think who for you is the most beautiful. And when I look at the script, I don't want to be affected by what the trends or what's popular. I want to go to what moves me. And if I think this little movie in the corn is just as good as some other movie, then I'm going to do that. It's easy.
2 movies 9 years apart with Mike Binder, The Upside of Anger, you and Joan Allen, really deserved. I hope people are continuing to discover it. It's a great movie where you're the neighbor of a woman whose husband's gone left. And then 9 years later, Black or White, the grandfather of a biracial girl who there becomes a custody dispute. You've said of Mike Binder, first of all, that there were a bunch in between those where you didn't agree to do them, but the ones that you picked, these scripts and performances that you gave are so great. And talk about difficult things. And again, you have monologue in Black or White, so great. But just those 2, I feel like, are something that people could go and revisit.
Black or White is a movie that deals with racism between Compton and Beverly Hills, and I ended up funding that. I paid for all of it. Just no one wanted to make this little movie, and I thought it was pretty good, so away we went. I told Mike we'd make it, and the person that was going to make it fell out, and I went, oh, Jesus. I told him we'd make it. This is my pile of money up there. All the shit I have in the world that I made. Am I going to risk it all for this movie called Black or White? Yeah. There he goes. Didn't make very much money, but I loved making it.
At the start of your career,
Careful.
at the start of your career, the idea of going, if you established yourself as a movie star to then go and do television was moving in the wrong direction. That is obviously no longer the case, but it's no longer the case because a few people like you changed that. And I think even before Yellowstone, there was Hatfields and McCoys, which was a History Channel 3-parter. And I guess I just wonder, again, you can, if you'd like to wrap Yellowstone into this, but just the idea when you decided to go to television, what factored into that decision?
Just writing.
Yeah.
Like there's no mystery about it. You can be charming all you want to be, but a movie you can't be charming for 2 hours, or in my case, 3 hours. It has to be about writing. That's all that supports movies. If they want to make the same movie a sequel, they got to figure out the writing. But I like to, it's about writing. Actors need it. They crave it. Their careers, if they base it on writing, I think they'll never feel bad about where their career's gone. So writers are underestimated. They're also whiners. They crybabies. Whoa, don't get everybody pay me, and I never get to, these jackasses. They have the most power in Hollywood, and they don't know it. Writers. If you can write, if you can really write, you can do anything you want, because every actor, every studio, everything is looking for the great script. And so if you want to be a director, become a writer and you can get anywhere you want if you can write, because that's the blood of what we do, writing. It's not movie stars. It's not anything. It's writers.
Before we come to Horizon, I got to ask you, and I want to ask you about one of my favorite of your performances, which is as John Dutton on Yellowstone. We've had a number of, I think, 5 seasons so far of this. It started out back in 2018, or went on Paramount Network, which we learned about because of Yellowstone. And but I just wonder if you could share how that one was presented to you, and kind of what the appeal was of this guy, John Dutton, at the outset.
It was the writing. When are you going to catch on to what I like?
Well, in this case, the writing, it's Taylor Sheridan, who'd done Hell or High Water. He'd done Wind River. Did you guys know each other before that?
He had talked to me about Hell or High Water, and I just didn't. I think that was Wind River.
Wind River, yeah.
But no, it came to me, and I thought he was just spot on with what he'd done. It's modern ranching, not a cowboy movie, but it's modern ranching. It's still going on in America. We still ride horses. We still get up before dark. All that meat that you find in the stores and the restaurants, somebody's doing that work. It's real work. And so he really captured that world. I respond to writing, and that's why I did it. And that's why I did it for 5 years. And maybe I'll do it again if the writing matches up with, there's really no mystery how to catch me. Just put the cheese right in the corner, and put it right there. And if it's like a really good script, we'll nail them. We'll get them.
Funny thing, your late father, who I was watching last night, I watched the clip of you winning your Oscars for Dance with Wolves, and it's unbelievable the resemblance that you two have. But he apparently advised you against taking Yellowstone?
Yeah, he said it's too nasty. He says you're going to lose your audience. There's a filthy mouth. They have filthy mouths, and he was in a kind of a what do you call it? Assisted living by that time. And the first year it became really successful, and all the nurses wanted to know about Yellowstone, and he just kept telling me after that, don't you quit that show. Don't you quit that show. And I talked to all these nurses about you, and they want to know what's happening next. 4 years it kept him alive, I think. The same guy said, this is terrible, this is nasty. You're going to lose your audience, Kevin. He said, you're going to lose your one job that you had. So,
just a couple stats related to that. Season 4 finale in January 2022 was the most watched telecast on cable since 2017. Season 5 premiere in November 2022 was watched by 4 million more people than that. This show gets the kind of viewership that nothing else really gets these days. And I wonder if you, based on what you hear from fans, your own take is, why has it popped so much in this time? Is there something that it says about the world today or something else?
That's my standard answer with
writing.
You, man. It's writing. It's really written well. It's fun. Who knows why? It's very difficult to pick what a hit's going to be. But it's not hard to pick what you think is good. If you try to translate that you know what a hit is, well, you're going to be chasing something. But if you actually know what good writing is, I think that's just going to support you. And this is it caught lightning, with an audience to see running horses, rivers that have never stopped, mountains that have never moved. Those are images that we'll never tire of. And if you can put a story against it, that's what happened.
The show has been out of production for a little while. There's been all kinds of anonymous people suggesting why that is. You have not really weighed in on that because I know you don't really do press unless you're promoting something. So you're promoting something now. Yeah. And I wonder, the suggestions that money, availability, conflicts with Horizon, whatever people have been saying, would you please set the record straight from your perspective about what's going on and whether or not you expect to come back to the show?
I will come back to the show if it lives up to everything that we've been trying to build on that show. It's just things happen with a show. 5 seasons is a lot. There was a season that we shut down completely, and no one really knows about it. We were about a month before we were start filming. We didn't film, and we went about 14 months before we came back. No one really knows about that. And I thought to myself, I can't let that happen to me again, because you can't just pick up another job. And so at that moment, I thought, well, if it happens once, it could happen again. I need to put myself in a position where that doesn't happen. And so I just, after starting Horizon in 1988, I don't really fall out of love. I love something in 1988. I love it today. It's very hard to move me off a position. It doesn't mean I won't, but until somebody says something that makes sense to me, that's where I stand. I know you want this Yellowstone thing. It just simply, Yellowstone was important to me. It's still important to me. I put it in first position, and I decided that I would make Horizon between the raindrops. And so that's what I did. I scheduled my movie between when we were supposed to make Yellowstone and when we were supposed to start. And somewhere along the line, they couldn't follow their dates. And I had 400 people waiting for me and my own money there. And so a series that I gave all my attention to for 5 seasons, I still was prepared to do that, but I couldn't break my word with actors that I made promises with. And a promise I made to myself. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at me. Let me check with my lawyer for something. How much? What are they talking about? Kevin, that much? Maybe you should think about it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I like money too, right? But it just doesn't inform my decisions. It just doesn't. Because if it all goes away, it all goes away. I know how to work. I can work on a fishing boat. I can build a house. I'm okay. And I don't want to spit on my life because I'm afraid.
Well, here we are, up to Horizon now, and I've got to...
Fuck, you take a long time. That's what this was about.
Hey, no.
Do you know where you're even at?
Now, 10 years ago, when you were doing Black or White, I had the opportunity to interview you, and you said, quote, "I have another Western that's about 10 hours long. What am I supposed to fucking do with that?" Close quote. You weren't sure.
I've changed. You can see I've changed.
You weren't sure if it would end up as a limited series or a series of films or something else, but you had, as you've said, already been thinking about it for years, going back to '88. So how did this idea first come to you? Why did it appeal to you? And I know that I want to reiterate that you are a co-writer of it with John Baird, who you also did your Explorer books with. And so I guess to put that more briefly, just how did it evolve?
After I made Silverado, I wanted to make another Western, and Mark Kasdan, who's Larry Kasdan's brother, I gave him an idea. I wanted to do this cowboy movie, and it was called Sidewinder. So I had it written in 1988, and I liked it. And I thought, I'll make this, I'll fit this in. But it was like about two guys. And in 2003, I decided I would make it right after Open Range. And the studio wouldn't make it. There was a $5 million difference. And the $5 million bugged me too much. So I wouldn't make it, I wouldn't make it for that. And so about 7 years passed, and I started thinking, well, this is probably the best example of who I am. Not that you probably already have drawn your own conclusion of who I am. But by the way, this is a really good format to talk with alcohol all around you. But honestly, to have an interview like this, I feel like I've been able to really, truly communicate with you. And there's nobody going to commercial, so I appreciate this format a little bit more than you might imagine. But I had this idea that, since the town seemed to really like that first one, the one in 1988, that no one else would make, I thought, well, fuck, I'm going to write 4 more. Really, Kevin? Nobody liked the first one. Nobody. There's like 8 studios. Nobody liked that first one, and you're going to write 4 more. Yeah, man, I have this really good idea. They didn't like the first one, and you're going to write 4 more. Yeah, what do you think? Well, no one particularly was itching to make the next 4 either. So I thought, I didn't know what to think. But there came a moment in my life where I said, I'm not out of love. I'm going to make this, and I don't really care about you. In fact, I'm actually glad you're there. Come on down here. I'm going to make a Western. I'm going to make 4 of them. I'm not going to make one and see how it goes and then make something up because it went well. I'm going to make all 4 of these guys. And so that's what I did. And that's maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, but half the people who went west didn't make any sense.
So the first one, which is premiering tonight, comes out in June.
Right.
The second one comes out in August.
Right.
Where do you stand on the additional installments?
I need some more money. I do. I need some of these big billionaires with fucking boats from here to here who are fond of telling people they're billionaires to come with me and make a movie. I don't have the money they had, and I've already made 2 of them. Where are you, rich guys?
Well, they're right out in the harbor here.
Yeah, where are you, tough guys? Let's put it all in the middle and see who blinks.
Now you hadn't.
So I'm serious, goddammit. Where are you? So me, I've been out there. I've shot 3 days already of chapter 3. I'm going to go back, and I think I have enough money to shoot another 7 or 8 days. That's just me. And it's just the way I like it. I'd like it to be easier, but I don't think it ever is going to be for me. And I don't think what I love is that much different than what you love, but I think that what I love is just a little different, and I think that's why I love it, and I think that's why I feel like it's worthy of sharing. It's just a little different. So I hope tonight, for those of you who see it, I just ask you to do one thing, and when the lights go out, and it's about to start, and you know it's about to start, I just want you to close your eyes for a second and become a little girl again or a little boy and open them and go for a ride with me to Horizon.
It's terrific.
That's how you close a show.
I'm closing
I don't
it.
want another question
I'm
from
closing
you.
it. I'm closing it. It's a terrific movie. I can't wait to see, for other people to see part 1. I can't wait to see part 2. Thank you so much for squeezing this in while you're here in Cannes, and keep it up. It's fun watching. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.
Really appreciate it.